I'm Becky Schoenfeld, W1BXY. I'm standing in front of W1AW, the flagship operating station at the American Radio Relay League in Newington, Connecticut. Over the next half hour, we're going to take you on a journey through time, exploring the ARRL, its contributions to amateur or ham radio, and look at the technologies from Michael Faraday's discovery of electromagnetic induction in 1831 to high-speed multimedia networks in 2013. You'll get a look at where amateur radio and the ARRL have been and see the technology shaping our future. Stay right here. This is the ARRL. The ARRL's diamond logo is recognized and copied by radio hams all over the world. But what has made it so successful for 100 years? It's simple. The ARRL is people.
I compete in amateur radio contests with other ham radio operators from around the world. I'm Valerie Hatzfeld, NV9L, and I am the ARRL.
Armando Landrian, KB1, PRP. I enjoy field day, and I am the ARRL.
I like doing public service events and working with people in my community, and I'm the ARRL.
I am the ARRL.
Ham radio people with an enthusiasm and passion to learn, to do, and to create. Our mission is to promote and advance the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio. ARRL not only reflects the commitment and enthusiasm of American hams, but also provides leadership as the voice of amateur radio in the USA, whether in dealings with the Federal Communications Commission, the World Radio Communication Conference, the International Amateur Radio Union, or with the general public. The ARRL is the primary source of information about what is going on in the ham radio world. It provides a number of books and web pages covering a spectrum of topics, and also provides news, support, and information for individuals and clubs, along with special operating events and all sorts of continuing education classes and other benefits to members. Being a member of ARRL is important for hams. The ARRL is devoted entirely to amateur radio, all of amateur radio. In fact, there would be no amateur radio as we know it today were it not for the ARRL members.
KL7 Yankee Kilo, 30JW.
This is W1AW, the flagship amateur radio station of the ARRL. When visiting ARRL headquarters, station W1AW is always the first place our members want to see. Visitors here may operate the station during visitor hours using any of the 3 operating studios. The Hiram Percy Maxon Memorial Station is known the world over. ARRL is America's National Association for Radio Amateurs, and there are over 700,000 people around the country who enjoy using and experimenting with wireless amateur communications. They do it for fun. No one pays them. That's why they're called amateurs, like amateur sports athletes. The ARRL is the largest and most influential amateur radio organization in the world. ARRL has led the way in making amateur radio the exciting, hands-on technical hobby it is today. Join me as we go on this journey through time.
Let's twist again, like we did last summer.
Experiments to communicate by radio started toward the end of the 1800s. No one person invented radio or radio waves. The universe has been bouncing around electromagnetic waves since time itself began. Much like notes played on a piano, these electromagnetic waves span many frequencies. Microwaves, and infrared. Visible light and X-rays. But way down here at the bottom end, these waves have some miraculous abilities that people only discovered around 1900. and ARRL members have been in the forefront of finding new and amazing uses ever since. Not only what we usually think of as a radio, but also today's smartphones, televisions, satellites, Wi-Fi, and all the things in today's wireless world. They're all radios, sending and receiving those low radio frequencies with nothing between them but air. However, in those early years, people believed only the lowest frequencies were of any real use. And while there were people like Marconi who worked on commercial opportunities, more and more amateurs got interested as well. But there was a major problem with range. To get any real distance, radio signals in these low frequencies needed a lot of power and huge antennas. Otherwise, to get a message to a distant place, you would need to relay it through several intermediate stations. And by 1914, a relay system is exactly what two ambitious hams created. Hiram Maxim and Clarence Tuska began the American Radio Relay League, ARRL. At this time, telephones were rare and telegrams were expensive and required a trip to the telegraph office. But some towns had amateur radio enthusiasts more than willing to demonstrate their hobby by sending personal messages called radiograms for free to other amateurs for delivery. And by 1917, ARRL's relay system reached all the way across the country.
A large part of the ARRL's success comes from our responsiveness to our members. We empower each member to openly share ideas and new developments, adopting what works best in a free exchange of ideas and new technology. It's been this philosophy which has kept us strong for over a century, while other groups have come and gone.
And to meet the amateurs' need to freely share their ideas, news, and how-tos, Tuska began publishing the magazine QST in 1915. QST is the monthly membership journal of ARRL. Each issue, print and digital, is your source for equipment reviews, technical tips, projects, and news. In addition to receiving QST by mail each month, ARRL members now have access to the digital edition of QST. QST provided a broad source of information, but everyone, commercial users and amateurs alike, were still using just a narrow part of the lowest radio frequencies, and bad behaviors began to creep in. Stronger stations jammed weak ones until no one could get a message through. But Hiram Maxim had a remedy for that.
ARRL members were held to high standards of operating practices, and they still are. In fact, amateur radio is one of the few radio services that the FCC depends upon pretty much to regulate itself. Through the ARRL, hams have developed a tradition of on-the-air courtesy. Bad behavior is shunned, and anonymity is not tolerated. Amateurs are assigned call signs, such as W1AW, by the federal government, and are proud to identify themselves. There are lots of David Sumners in the world, but there is only one K1ZZ.
But the biggest threat to amateur radio came from World War I. In 1918, Josephus Daniels, Secretary of the Navy, ordered the total shutdown of all radio use as the Navy was taking over. While approximately 4,000 hams enlisted to help communications work, the Navy had total control of all wireless technology. This was supposed to be only for the duration of the war, but in April 1919, the year after the war ended, Daniels refused to release the Navy's total monopoly over radio use.
So the fight was on. This was the first of many great challenges faced by the ARRL. Maxim and Tuska responded with the Blue Card Appeal, which was essentially a public relations campaign using their own money to send out a mass mailing to every ham radio operator in the country, getting them to write Congress with their objection. Daniels countered with a new bill in the Senate, permanently giving the Navy all control. Maxim struck back in the Congress with the introduction of a House Joint Resolution. Daniels came back again, declaring that people would be allowed to receive radio signals, but only the Navy can send anything. But Maxim and the hams finally won out as Congress forced the Navy to give up their radio monopoly, and the hams went back on the air. In fact, both commercial and amateur radio use exploded.
Amateurs soon discovered the real magic of radio waves. Using higher frequencies, the so-called short waves, their radio signals now could cross continents. And in 1923, John Reinertz and Fred Schnell made direct two-way contact from Connecticut with Leon Deloy in France. The age of wireless intercontinental communication was started by amateurs. As hams learned how to skip radio signals around the world and international radio communication grew, the International Amateur Radio Union was formed in Paris. ARRL helped hams share these discoveries and tricks by publishing the very first ARRL handbook in 1926. Since then, this annual publication has grown with the technology, being constantly updated to be acclaimed as the most comprehensive RF engineering reference in the world. The 1920s were an exciting time. Radio was the rage, and the ARRL held its first radio contests. The 1930s began even better.
The early 1930s saw ARRL encouraging hams with lots of operating activities. There was the first ARRL sweepstakes. The first ARRL field day was held in 1933. Hams were involved in many notable rescue operations and emergency work. The Amateur Radio Emergency Service, ARES, was formed. The Yagi-type directional antenna was developed, and Armstrong defined the new type signals we call FM. And in 1937, ARRL created the DXCC Award for hams, contacting 100 or more countries, our most popular award. In 1938, the ARRL built W1AW, our flagship radio station.
At the end of the 30s, there were about 42,000 hams in the U.S., and the hobby was growing fast. But storm clouds gathered as World War II began. All international transmissions were banned in 1940. A shortage of radio tubes for military radios resulted in the government asking ARRL to help collect them from hams as donations. Over 25,000 amateur radio operators volunteered for military service. They helped develop radar systems, proximity fuses, code analysis, and served as communications specialists. Unlike World War I, at the end of the war years, hams were back on the air and even had new, very high frequencies to use. In the 1950s, thousands of people got the new amateur radio novice license. But the world changed in 1957.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket.
And that day arrived, October 4th, 1957.
With the surprise launch of Russia's Sputnik in 1957, the space race began, and amateur radio operators were again in the thick of things. Americans began a drive to catch up, and major efforts were directed at getting citizens more involved in the sciences. While amateurs always sought more knowledge and skill, the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the space race, and nuclear fears created pressures for everyone to get more education in technology. Hams responded with Project Oscar, and in 1961 launched the first amateur radio satellite, Oscar 1. This is an exact copy of the original that went in space. By 1969, a whole organization, the Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation, AMSAT, was formed. AMSAT designs, builds, arranges for, and operates satellite-carrying amateur radio payloads.
The ARRL has continued to play a major role in space, working with the Shuttle Amateur Radio Experiment, SAREX, which promoted the use of amateur radio by astronauts on the space shuttle with other amateur radio stations around the world. Today we have the Amateur Radio on the International Space Station, or ARRIS, program. In the 1970s, the International Telecommunication Union, the world's overall coordinating body for radio and other frequency uses, decided to do a comprehensive survey of all radio communications frequencies. The phrase used was, "from DC to daylight." Realizing this could change amateur radio, ARRL President Bob Denniston and staffer Dick Baldwin took the initiative to prepare a comprehensive, unified plan for ham spectrum. By working with the ARRL staff, they presented an overall proposal at an ITU conference in 1979, and the result was that hams gained use of 3 new radio bands at 10, 18, and 24 megahertz. Meanwhile, back in the USA, ARRL worked with the FCC and began its Volunteer Examiner program in 1984. Now, hams themselves would be responsible for testing other hams for FCC licenses, developing a trust relationship enduring for over 30 years. ARRL also worked to get the FCC's Memorandum Opinion and Order, PRB1, that requires reasonable accommodation of hams in antenna zoning. And with the development of more CC&R private land use restrictions, the ARRL is looking at ways to find relief from them as well. And amateurs created a whole network of FM repeaters, allowing even the weak signals of small pocket-sized radios to reach out over large areas.
There's no question but that amateur radio as we know it today would not exist were it not for past and present generations of ARRL members. Their actions, advancing and promoting not just themselves, but all of amateur radio, has made the difference.
The ARRL created and maintains the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, a program of public service communications volunteers, and provides training and liaison with other organizations that use our services in disasters.
The ARRL hosts many contests throughout the year for polishing our operating skills and just having fun with radio. The ARRL hosts operating and special events, including Field Day and the simulated emergency tests. The ARRL provides awards promoting operating excellence, measured by how many places you may have contacted, and also in the skills you use to make those contacts.
For decades, the ARRL has been the organization hams can go to asking for the latest technical information and help. When there's a question about the FCC regulations or other legal matter involving amateur radio, ARRL is the place to get the correct information. We may not always like the answers, but they will be correct.
ARRL members lead the way in promoting and advancing the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio. This became even more evident with the computer explosion of the 1990s. Hams had already been exploring microprocessors for years, and far from seeing computers as a threat, hams embraced them, incorporated them into the hobby, and the ARRL empowered them by again making the information available to all.
When I read articles in QST or in the ARRL's books, I can understand them. There are articles and books from antenna building to weather spotting. The writing is hams helping other hams, and I think, hey, I can do that.
With ARRL's publications, references, and introductions, radio amateurs are empowered and exploring microwaves, satellite communications, Wi-Fi options, and mesh networks, building stations for themselves from huge contest facilities to the smallest backpack radios, even to putting them into tuna fish cans. Today's hams are already working on the systems for tomorrow, such as software-defined radios, or SDRs, where the radio is a computer. Want a new radio? You'll just be able to download it.
Advancing the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio for all hams involves education. And no amateur organization does more in education than the ARRL. Not only do we publish books and materials on ham radio topics, ARRL and the ARRL Foundation provide scholarships, professional development training, support, and even radio equipment to schools. We even provide telecommunications training to leaders and rising stars from developing countries and teach them about amateur radio. We train engineers and others in finding and correcting interference problems. And we go to maker fairs to show amateur radio options to up-and-coming inventors.
But there are challenges, too. In 1996, some of the frequencies used by hams were threatened to be taken over by Little LEOs, low Earth orbiting satellites for commercial use. Then, in 2004, came another commercial scheme called Broadband over Power Lines, or BPL, which would flood the spectrum with interference. Once again, it was the ARRL members leading the fight to protect all of amateur radio. Using hard facts to oppose wishful thinking, the ARRL fought politics with physics. The commercial threats to our amateur radio frequencies continue as more and more wireless devices want bandwidth. These commercial companies have money and power. Hams have the ARRL.
When Katrina came in 2005, the ARRL members responded, and over 1,000 hams came to help in reestablishing communications. The abilities of amateur radio's people in such devastation was noted by the government.
Amateur radio has grown to the largest number of hams in U.S. history. Even with the development of a cellular phone world, the fun, hobby, technical skills, and emergency options provided by amateur radio are growing dramatically.
But these new hams are just as rooted in computers as in radio, so they've developed hybrid systems employing the abilities of both. Today's hams are fluent with systems like D-Star, IRLP, Echolink, and APRS, all systems that use integrated digital radio and computer technologies. And they are constantly finding and creating new applications, along with apps for smartphones and other wireless devices. Where do we go from here? Our mission is to promote and advance the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio. How we do it is up to you. By being an ARRL member, you not only reflect the commitment and enthusiasm of American hams, but also provide leadership as the voice of amateur radio in the USA, whether in dealings with the Federal Communications Commission, the International Telecommunication Union, the International Amateur Radio Union, or with the general public. The ARRL is all of us working together. For 100 years, ARRL members have been there to defend our spectrum, to help teach new hams, to encourage your enjoyment with contests and activities, to promote amateur radio in the media, to advocate for hams in Washington and in international conventions, to share the joy of creating new things, learning new things and realizing, hey, I can do that, and to do all that we can to help you enjoy our great hobby. And we're just getting started.
I am the ARRL.
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 Y yo soy la ARRL.
I am the ARRL.
I am the ARRL.
I am the ARRL.